Thank you, Sherry.
All right, we're live.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I now call to order the City of College Place City Workshop. Terry, will you please take roll call?
Mayor Hernandez,
Present.
Councilmember Jessup,
Present.
Councilmember Cleveland,
Present.
Councilmember Espinoza,
Present.
Councilmember Peterson,
He's going to be a little late, he said, but he'll be here.
Councilmember Williams has asked to be excused. Councilmember Sherman
Present.
and Councilmember Boyle.
Present.
Thank you. We do have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Will you all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. It's now time for public comment. Sherry, did anyone submit a comment in advance?
I did not receive any comments and there is no one in the attendance list.
Okay, so is there anyone in attendance in the council chambers that would like to speak during public comment? All right, seeing none, we're gonna move on to workshop topics. We have 8 of them tonight. No action will be taken, so. And the first one we have is the Walla Walla Valley Blue Zones presentation by Mr. Bolt.
Oh,
Did we move that?
yeah, we have tax increment financing first, then.
Okay. First on the agenda is the draft tax increment financing study for Stone Creek and downtown, and Mr. Stowe will present on that.
And I'll provide an introduction to this and I'll turn it over to Mr. Stowe. So as you recall, some months ago, you all authorized Mr. Stowe to begin an analysis of the appropriate tax increment financing areas and various return on investment, and if it essentially pencils. So tax increment financing up until 2 years ago wasn't allowed in this state. All the other states had it, but we didn't. It's really how you get development projects that are large in scale and move forward. And the premise behind the TIF is essentially you have your baseline, which would be now. This study essentially takes out various scenarios of what it could look like in 20-25 years. And then the increment is essentially what you can use to bond against to put in the infrastructure to help the development become reality. So as we've alluded to for years really now, this is really needed to get downtown as well as the southwest periphery of the city primed and ready to go through development. This study is needed because per the state code that related to TIF, you need this study. It needs to be turned into the state treasurer's office for 90-day review. And then they say whether or not they're good with it, and then it comes back. And then in essence, y'all decide to move forward with TIF or not, and then bond against it. But it's key to get this thing in a treasurer's office. So Bob's going to provide a little introduction on the findings and answer any questions you may have. But then time's of the essence to get it to the state treasurer. So at the next business meeting, it'll go before you to essentially send it over there. So with that, Bob.
Great. Thank you, Michael. So what I wanted to do this evening, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you, is to give you the sort of the high level findings of the project analysis, which I know you have in your packet. And I believe you can all see this on your monitors and your screen.
Yeah.
And this is a basic model, and you've seen some of these slides from likely previous presentations from your city administrator and staff. But this is a basic TIF model. as the city administrator indicated, it's the incremental taxes that are captured from the increased value that's created from the investment that you're making in the infrastructure. And Washington State's TIF law is unique in that it was designed not to harm any existing taxing districts, so they'll continue to receive their base as they have in previous years. And it also does not apply to school districts or the state's property tax. So those are excluded from any property tax calculation inside the tax increment area. TIF's available to cities, counties, and ports tool for larger projects, as your city administrator has identified. Our TIF legislation in law is designed more for specific project and sites rather than simply put the infrastructure in and hope development will happen. It's really designed, again, for development that's ready to go, if not for the fact that the infrastructure was missing. Projects will not occur but for the requirement of the infrastructure. This is sometimes referred to as the but-for requirement in many TIF programs. Result in, of course, the creation of new AV, which is creating the additional tax dollars that will be coming to you. Creates public benefits, of course, construction of the desired development, short and long-term jobs. And then taxes from the development as a premise of TIF funds the public infrastructure needed by the development. And an important point here is that there's no individual impact on property tax owners. It's not a new tax. It's simply redirecting taxes that normally would have gone through other jurisdictions, but for the fact that you've created this investment, therefore, new tax dollars are getting generated because of that higher AV. So not a new tax. Want to be very clear on that point. Some key elements is that the city, county, or port must adopt an ordinance. You need to do that prior to June 1 of any 1 year in order for that tax increment area to go into effect that year. You cannot have more than 2 active tax increment areas at any one time, and they may not overlap. Tax increment areas also, when you form them, cannot be more than 200 million of assessed valuation or more than 20% of your total AV. You cannot change the boundary once you adopt the ordinance, nor can you add additional public improvements. You can make changes to add additional elements so long as you're still moving forward with the same public improvements. You must also have a deadline as to when to start those public improvements, and that generally has to be within 5 years after you adopt the ordinance. There is a provision in the law that allows you to extend that for a good cause. And the local government may only receive tax increment financing revenues for the time period that's necessary to pay for the cost of those public improvements. So if you issue debt and your debt retires in 10 years, so does the tax increment area. And the maximum time that the tax increment area can be in place is 25 years. So these are the infrastructure projects that have been identified that are necessary in order to stimulate development in the Stone Creek and downtown area. The largest project is the Majoyner Road, and that has a TIF cost of $4.3 million. Now, many of these projects have additional costs beyond what TIF is contributing towards, but there may be other contributions through grants, through other sources of the city, or even from private development that may come into play. East-West Road, a cost of $1.9 million. Signalization at College Avenue and East-West Road, $550,000, and the downtown parking lots, $1.4 million. So total TIF contribution would be just $8.1 million. This is the tax increment area. It largely contains the area that's referred to as the Stone Creek area, and then, of course, the downtown area along College Avenue. It represents 259 acres of total area and an average AV, or AV rather, of $43 million. This is your levy that would be applied to the tax increment area. If you looked at the 2022 tax column, that's a total levy of $11.60 some odd cents per thousand. Then you deduct the state schools and then the other exempt levies that don't participate in TIF and come up with a $4.17 per $1,000 of assessed AV levy. We created a private development program working with the developers that will likely develop on these properties in a number of phases, specifically within the Stone Creek area of phase 1 north, phase 2 and 3 and 4 of all different phases. You can see the number of units in these columns, the value that these units, market value that they're believed to have, the years that construction will start, and then the build out typically, or the absorption rate associated with those units. We've also included some commercial aspects of the project that are listed down under this phase of labeled as McKernan and then downtown. But in total, there's $414 million of private investment within the tax increment area that's driving the tax increment financing revenues over a 25-year period. This is a site plan for the Stone Creek development, a draft site plan, and this is what we've largely based the development pro forma and program that I just went over with you on, in terms of the total units of 659 units, and at the time they had some additional units that may either be senior housing or multifamily, but that's in this area here. Your debt capacity in 2023 for non-voted debt, which is limited to 1.5% of your total AV, is 12.1 million. And if you financed 8.16 of debt, you would have remaining almost $4 million of debt capacity moving forward. So in addition to the baseline scenario, which represents the most aggressive development scenario, as full development, we've also looked at some other alternatives as part of a sensitivity analysis. And so alternative 1 extends the build out or the years for all development by double, and then reduces a single family home valuation by 20%. So if we had 4 years for build out, that now becomes 8 years, or if we had 10 years, that now becomes 20 years. Alternative 2, we did the same thing. We reduced the build out, doubled it, also reduced single family home, in this case by 30%, the value rather than 20%. Also reduced senior housing or multifamily housing, whatever it turns out to be, by 50%. And then only included one aspect of the commercial development, and that's the hotel development. These are the revenues that are generated from each of those 3 scenarios, baseline, alternative, and alternative 2. And we've listed them both in terms of 2 different interest rates or discount rates, 4.5% and 5%. These numbers represent the total value of infrastructure improvement that you could complete. Under the baseline, it would be just over $17 million. Under alternative 1 would be 13.8, and alternative 2, 9.9 million. And alternative 1 is where, at least for the purposes of the project analysis, is the alternative we believe is most likely. You also receive some additional taxes above and beyond the property tax revenues from the TIA that are generated. And the bulk of these dollars are from one-time sales taxes, where you have in the baseline, $21.6 million of additional revenue will come to you if that development were to be completed along the same timeframes and the scope under the baseline scenario. 19.2 under alternative 1, and then 6.9 under alternative 2. Jobs range, temporary jobs related to the construction aspect of the private development range from 770 jobs to just over 1,100 jobs. And then for ongoing jobs from 40 to 230 jobs. And these are jobs that would solely reside within the tax increment area. They're not the result of additional population, additional residences, and then the influence that has on your downtown or other places outside the city. They're just with jobs that are generated inside the tax increment area. We looked at what the AV growth would be without any infrastructure investment. And based on discussion with staff, we believe that to be about 75% fewer housing units, and no commercial components would likely be developed if not for the fact that if infrastructure were not to be provided through the tax increment financing program. And you can see under these 5-year increments in 2028, with no TIF dollars, you'd have a AV of about 37 million, not much different than what it is today. But with the development projecting 184 million And then looking all the way at 2048, similar numbers, 168 million without any TIF. And then with TIF, $858 million of assessed valuation. This is the debt service schedule, just simply having level debt over that 25-year period. Actually, it looks like 20 years of debt over the 25-year period. Of $629,000 annually would be the debt service based on 4.5% interest. There's a lot of information in this chart. And I don't expect you to study all of it. It's also included within your project analysis. But what I wanted to point out is that the red represents all of the deficits that would occur within any 1 year over that 25-year period. So it's the interim financing that would be necessary for you to pay your debt service until those revenues coming in sufficiently that you're able then to pay yourself back. And so under the baseline scenario, which is the most aggressive, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 years of payments in which you'd have to find elsewhere that are not contained, are not provided to you with the TIF revenues. So other sources of revenues would have to be used until the development becomes stabilized to pay yourself back. And of course, under the alternatives, you have more years under alternative 1 and the most years under alternative 2, because that's not a dense of development. It's less private development, and so therefore less revenues to pay, less revenues to utilize in order to pay your debt service. So we looked at one alternative in the project analysis is if you issued a split debt and issued just the $4.3 million initially in 2024 from a Joyner Road, and then a second debt issuance, $3.8 million for all the other improvements by the deadline within the 5-year period by 2028. And so in that scenario, we see 7 years of deficits that range from 2.7 million under the previous sort of scenario, with all the debt being issued at once, down to $1.5 million. So you still have 7 years of deficits, but now at least you've trimmed the amount down that you would have to find interim financing for, from 2.7 to 1.5. We then looked at the full debt, no split. In other words, issuing the $8.1 million of debt all at one time at interest only for 5 years. And that generates similar numbers in that it would be 7 years of deficits down from 2.7 to 1.7 million. So a little bit more, but you're able to issue the full debt. This scenario is if you utilize the additional taxes, and the additional taxes represent only utilizing 70% of those tax dollars that you would receive from the development, mainly sales tax. And then 30% could be used for operating expenses or any other expenses that you chose. But for our assumption, we use 70% of those. That would drop the amount of interim financing down to 4 years of deficit and down to $1.5 million in total. And then finally, we looked at a scenario where if you split the debt, you additionally issued the amount necessary from a Joyner Road, and then several years later issued the rest of it, applied the additional taxes, and then did interest only. We're able to come up with a scenario where you don't have the need for any interim financing. You have sufficient revenues with the combination of the two split or the TIF revenues plus the additional taxes to pay for the full debt service associated with those improvements. Our timeline, of course, we've now completed the project analysis, and then subject to your consent, we would submit that to the state to start them under their 90-day review period. The state would then provide comments to you at the end of that 90-day period, in which you would then consider prior to adopting any ordinance, which is not scheduled for adoption until May. Between now and March, we'll also be meeting with impacted taxing districts to address any questions that they might have, how the law would operate or what the impacts might be, if there are any, to those jurisdictions. May have another meeting with council to discuss the draft ordinance associated with forming a tax increment area and preparing you for that formal consideration in May. But but the next time, the action that you'll be asked to take sometime in May would be to adopt a tax increment ordinance forming the TIA. And it's at that time that the TIA would be effective, would be June 1 of this year. And then if for whatever reason, if the ordinance is not adopted by in May or prior to June 1 of this year, you need to wait until the following cycle, the following year of June 1 in order for the TIA to be effective. And of course, following the adoption of the ordinance, you may have development agreements that you'd be executing with private developers to ensure that provide a little higher level of confidence that development will proceed in accordance with the schedule. You'll evaluate kind of the development and the readiness of the market and the private developer, issue debt presumably in 2024, and then monitor development activity. Certainly if you're going to issue a second debt issuance, to make sure that development is in line with, and the kind of revenue that it generates is sufficient to pay for a second debt issuance. And that finishes my presentation, and I'd be glad to address questions that council might have.
All right, thank you. I have a few questions, but I'm gonna let council ask theirs, because we might be have the same questions. So Councilmember Jessup, questions or comments?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. It seems to me it may be a little bit early on it because since February, March, maybe risks and benefits. Appreciate all the work and all the options. Obviously, this many eyes and ears on it. You know, you look at it and go, well, that's, you know, cash inflow, be able to pay for these types of things. So in terms of the role of a council, what is it that we need to look for with this many eyes and ears to pay attention to? Obviously, it's been done in all these other states. What are the things that we can learn from the other states and pay attention to, that pitfalls we can prevent or mitigate from our role as council?
Well, I would just say, speaking as someone that operated in Illinois and Oregon, where their rules are way more open than this, it's really what you saw before you. So for instance, in Illinois, you don't even have to do a report like that. It's literally, I'm gonna do a TIF for 12 million bucks, and magically it'll appear in 20 years, and you can actually just do debt on that and figure it out. So, and then not just that, but other sensitive taxing districts aren't protected in those other states. So for instance, you can actually do TIF against school district revenue and things like that. So the fact that they make you do all these scenarios, that is an inherent protection. So that's number one.
Can I add on?
Yeah.
Okay, so also protection is that any in debt we go counts against our cap. And so other states, that is kind of just this mysterious pot of money out there that doesn't count towards their constitutional debt limit, and ours does here. So that's kind of a self-regulation as well.
So by the very nature, we're not gonna get, you know, oh, good, we got money, and then just go beyond with our capacity.
And another complaint is lack of transparency. Like Mike said, they just set it up and let it go.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, and the fact that we have to have these workshops, and generally, you know, in Washington State, where everyone sees everything that a city does. Which is a good thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's
Sorry to
great, I
interrupt.
appreciate it. No,
Yeah, and then I would say the other thing too is we're taking a very conservative approach to this, really, where a lot of numbers we were playing with was alternative one, trying to play with subdued revenue numbers. And that's why when you look at the numbers for those various capital projects compared to the capital improvement plan you'll pass, you'll notice that the numbers are lower than those. And how we're making up with that is a combination of income from the developer, some grants, and all of that to do a layer cake of finance. And because Majania Road's a lot more than 4 million, but it's gonna be a combination of that, MPO grant money, likely a state transportation improvement board, and then also that federal earmark we obtained too. So all of that together essentially ends up equaling what those projects will be. And the other thing that's nice with the TIF regulation in the state too is that you have to specify generally what projects you're using it for. So it isn't like, hey, we're just going randomly for this amount of money. It's on a certain menu of projects. And then the other thing we're gonna be doing in tandem with this, and I've already communicated it to the main developer, which is that Lakeside Group that bought Mr. Christensen's property, is in tandem, we're gonna be working on developing the developer agreement with them. The master developer agreement, they'll have some guarantees in there too, to protect the city. So we'll get all that in line by the time we come back to you to essentially adopt this thing or not. This is merely the entry level stage to send it to the treasurer.
Yeah.
And then one thing before I end my notes on this question is that this also did go before the Economic Development Commission. Last night, they did vote to recommend this to city council, so please be aware of that. And then also, I did present some options about this at the last Port Economic Development meeting in front of everyone. Because while locally we're first out to the gate on this, actually last night, City of Walla Walla presented the same thing at their city council. Because they're too late to the game to do it this year, but next year they're planning to do something similar to punch South Myra Road through. And the reason I tell you all this, and you'll see this later in the economic development flyers, because there's a correlation going on. But really, I'm of the belief structure based on that day, that this valley can only really support like one additional major shopping economic center. So frankly, whoever gets the apple first on this, I think gets the rewards. So that's why it's essential we try to get this going this year, because then we'll be ahead of the game. And I will mention that relative to other TIFs that recently were adopted, this is a very subdued one relative to risk. Because like, for instance, City of Pasco, they just passed their Broadmoor tax increment financing, and that's in the neighborhood of 50 million in TIF. So that's just to give you a little scale of what's going on.
Well, I appreciate it very much. I know you guys have done due diligence. I personally appreciate the idea of it's necessary, needed, and a powerful tool, but yet, conservative by nature of just getting what we need, but not excessive to put us in a big hole later. So thank you.
Councilmember Cleveland.
Yeah, I like the idea. It sounds great. A lot of eyes on it. Excited to move forward. During the presentation, I was kind of trying to understand some of there's one of this, we got baseline, alternative 1, alternative 2, and I was trying to understand that, but I apologize, kind of my eyes were glazing over a bit. Could you explain that again, please?
Bob, could you explain that in more depth? Otherwise,
Yeah.
I'll be too general.
And when you do.
General's good. Just
Well,
Can you kind
beyond general, though,
can you kind of explain the advantages and disadvantages to each one, if there are any?
Absolutely. So we started first with the baseline development, which is after working with the private developers of this site, determined that these were the likely number of residential units, a number of commercial square footage, and what we anticipated might occur in the downtown from at least a conservative standpoint, identified the number of build out years, and then assigned a value, a market value, based on our knowledge of the industry as to what this might generate, and then get converted into an AV increase at the county level. And so this represents really the full build out and likely the most aggressive type of scenario that you would see. It's not one that we would necessarily say this is what you should rely upon, because we'd like to be more conservative of that. But that's where we started at. So that's the baseline. And then from the baseline, what we did is we said that every development that said it was going to take 4 years, now that's going to take 8. Every development that's going to take 2 years, now it's going to take 4 to complete. So the TIF revenues are going to change based on scope and magnitude of the development, as well as the timing of development. If that development's occurring at the later end of the 25 years, it's not going to generate as much revenue for you as it would if it's occurring at the beginning. So that was an important consideration. The other thing we did is if we were off by the single family home value, which is these values here of 524, 676, 817, these were produced by the private developer. If those were too high, at least as part of a sensitivity analysis, we said, let's reduce those by 20%. So what that does, it gives you just a little bit more conservative analysis of what might happen under a development or alternative one. And of course, that's going to bring in fewer dollars over a 25-year period than the baseline. Alternative two, we did some additional things. We reduced the value by 30%, not 20, so 10% further reduction. And then we reduced all of these housing units that were indicated here, these 170 units. We reduced those. They're labeled as senior housing, but I understand those may also just simply be multifamily housing. We reduced those by half. So that 170 be reduced by one half. And then from the hotel, we said only the hotel development work would occur on the McKernan parcel versus under the baseline, we had identified 200,000 square feet of retail, large format, and then smaller retail of 80,000 square feet. So, you know, of the $86 million that was anticipated to be occurred on that parcel, we limited it to just a $30 million. So significantly reduced the development opportunity there, just for purposes of the analysis itself.
Okay, so kind of what I understand at this point was we got this baseline, fairly optimistic view of what the value of all this land could be if we put in this infrastructure. We borrow against that, you know, we get a lot of money. So we're backing it up for alternative one, saying let's look at this conservatively. You know, what's a reasonably hopeful number that we could get that's pretty conservative, and then alternative two is even more so, like, you know, let's not push the envelope. What's a very reasonable, achievable amount? Let's borrow against that. Okay.
Yes. And in all cases, although we indicated alternative one is probably the more likely scenario, just, you know, for the purpose of analysis, all of the scenarios, whether it's 5% or 4.5%, or you're able to achieve your debt service of 8.1 million.
All right.
I think market correction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Councilmember Peterson?
I have a question. Yeah, I joined this a little late and I apologize for that, but you know, it's like we're ordering off of some menu in some restaurant here. There's going to be a recommendation other than us trying to figure out how does that work? You know, we got baseline, we got this, we got that, we got square footage, we got housing values or this or that. That's interesting. Where does this end?
Yeah.
So it is, once you adopt a tax increment area, that's the decision. That's all you need to do in terms of forming that tax increment area that allows it to exist, allow taxes to be generated and then distributed to you. Your next decision point in terms of related to TIF is to how much debt you will be issuing. What's your level of confidence to issue all of that 8.18 million, utilizing, you know, this as background, utilizing whatever the, you know, the market is telling you, whatever the private developer is telling you, whatever comes out of your negotiations with the development agreement in terms of financially backstopping possibly some of that risk. And so it's just really understanding the risk so that you're fully prepared before you issue the debt, so that you know what the risks are if private development doesn't happen as scheduled, so that you can utilize then some other sources to pay that debt.
The top being 8 million.
Yeah. Yeah, so
So how-
yeah, so as you can see, with the amount that we're looking at TIF to cover, the 8 million, approximately the amount that gets yielded via your baseline, your alternative one, and alternative two, it's within that for all of them, because
Yeah,
we were
okay.
being very conservative on this. And the main reason being is because A, we're paranoid, and then B, well, I have been seeing how Illinois ones have backfired. I'm just really paranoid about that sort of thing. But then also, just in case of a rainy day, I think it's key that we always maintain some sort of reserve as far as council management. I mean, we've all seen the wells that, I mean, who who was the guess, like 2 of our wells would go sideways over the last couple of years. So you always want to maintain some level that you can do debt council manically if something weird happens. Because originally when we were crunching the numbers, we were gonna request more, but then we were looking and it was only gonna leave about 2 million, council manically. And I felt the comfort level relative to just what we've seen on other emergency projects was to get up near the 4. So we're counteracting that by trying to make more demands of the developer and then also backstop it with additional grants, of which you're gonna see several of those resolutions next week. But yeah, that's the general idea.
So Mike, I'm sorry, is it fair to say this debt load?
Yeah.
Even though it's a different source.
Yeah.
With what's happening recently, counts against the city's total debt load.
It does.
And I think I've heard that
It
and
does.
lost it, but
It does count against the amount you can issue council manically, which means
that's true. Yeah.
which means the non-voter approved. However, what I will say, just given the nature of that development, it really makes sense to try to do the infrastructure at least with Majanier and East-West Road in a fell swoop. And the main reason why is because that area is in town and it's really the only area where the development can be fit at. But the challenge is while we have the sewer out there, your roads, your water, that sort of thing doesn't exist. Plus the public schools already bought land out there too. So that is the growth area. So I mean, that's why really we need to make that sort of thing happen. And then just by the nature of how tight our urban growth area is, frankly, if you're getting any commercial at all, it's going one of 2 places. It's either going behind Home Depot, and we already have all the infrastructure hooked up to that one, or there. And I mean, that's the areas. Or if we waited on it, it would probably go elsewhere, and then longer term, that would have major ramifications for us. So,
Thanks, Mike.
yeah.
Councilmember Espinosa, questions or comments?
Yeah, a couple of questions. So, I think that it's always important to be fiscally conservative to avoid risk. And just a question, I mean, in this environment where real estate is really taking an impact with building costs on the rise, which have been leveling off a little bit, but interest rates have been going up as well. How certain are we that the schedule for building is going to take place according to plan for the builder? So comment number 1, and then if that does not end up happening, where does that leave the city if they don't build according to schedule with a TIF?
Well, I can answer that. Really, what you've seen is if we were just following what the developer predicted, that's the baseline. Because we're trying to be super conservative about this, based on what Mr. Stowe presented, you'll see we punted out like ×2, and in some cases left out very specific elements that they said they would do, just to see like a really worst case scenario, does this thing still pencil? And when you look at it, yes, it does. So that is what those alternative 1s and 2s were. If we were just going carte blanche on what the developer said, that'd be the baseline, and you'll see relative to those other scenarios, it's like way dialed down from the baseline. And then as far as what you do if it doesn't happen, I mean, really our security risk on that is the developer agreement, which we're engaging in those discussions. And that's gonna have some collateral and securities in it. And there's really 2 premises there. You have the developer agreement, and then a big part of that is going to be they want to proceed under that master plan development code, which again mandates they do a developer agreement with us. So there's various levels of security here. And that's if you didn't take into account the fact that we barely have an urban growth area and pretty much you're stuck with what you're stuck with. So, I mean, based on how limited that is, I mean, if they can go right now, I mean, our vacancy rate, even the last economic development meeting the port has around 0.5%. And people are hiring and people are having problems finding houses. So, I mean, I get that we're in a little bit of a malaise relative to what it was, but I would counter that a lot of the key employers here do tend to be resilient in that way, where, like, for instance, when the economy is good, it isn't as boom as like Tri-Cities is, but on the other hand, when stuff goes south, it relatively is a steady course because you have the resilient industries of the penitentiary, Army Corps, the VA, and the colleges. And then frankly, when stuff gets really bad, your enrollment at the colleges goes sky high too. So that ends up countering it more. So I really don't see a scenario where nothing would happen out there, because literally where are people gonna go? Because if it doesn't go here, I mean, what you're basically left with, I mean, the mountains are just east of Walla Walla. And if you didn't have to go here in the limited lands in Walla Walla, the only option at that point would be packing it in and having people move the Pasco and the Tri-Cities. So that's really the brass tacks of the matter.
Yeah, there's also a couple of large developments taking place in Walla Walla as we speak, right? So those could be a couple of factors to consider as well. So the next question that I wanted to ask is the TIF captures property taxes generated from the increased assessed valuation. Does that happen before the improvements or after?
After. There may be some value captured while construction is going on. The assessor may pick up some of that, but generally the majority of those expenses and those increases going to occur once the construction is completed.
Thank you.
In some cases, you may also have it be minimal, but sometimes the private infrastructure or the public infrastructure loan may, if there's no utilities, no infrastructure on the site now, it may cause somewhat of a jump, and you're going to get a small incremental value of AV increase and then tax, but most of it's going to come from the private development.
Councilmember Sherman?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was next. What would be a reason to not do this?
If you believe that the risk were too great and the reward was too low. And so any kind of sort of real estate development or, return on investment that a city might make, I would simply ask that they look at it from a risk reward perspective. Are the risk low and the reward great? Then that's something that I would use as a guide. And then you try to also have plan B. Plan B would be, what if the development just doesn't happen? And you still have the requirement to satisfy that $8.1 million of debt. And so we also looked at your finances. Certainly you have that amount available to you if you chose to use it, and your reserves alone, at least the average reserve amount that you've had exceeded the amount that you'd be issuing debt against. As the city administrator mentioned, you have additional debt capacity if you needed to issue. But you likely also would reprioritize some of your existing capital programs. If you had to satisfy a debt, an obligation, you'd probably take some things off the planning board that were scheduled to be on in order to satisfy that debt.
Thank you. That's very helpful. The whole presentation was great. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Boyle?
Councilmember Boyle has left the workshop.
Oh,
Yeah, she was having some internet issues, she said earlier.
okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, my questions were addressed, so.
And this will be going before you meeting next week, and you aren't formally like approving bond or indebtedness or anything, but it's merely to direct staff to start additional outreach and then to send this thing to the treasurer's office, because we have to beat that statutory deadline.
Does anybody think they're not gonna be prepared to go one way or the other next week? No question, okay. Just wanted to make sure that we could address it if it wasn't necessary.
But, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I missed mentioning it because next week I'll be in Olympia doing legislative stuff, so that's why I wanted
Yeah,
to.
so we won't be able to ask Mike questions.
What's the deadline again?
The deadline, we have to have this approved and everything is June 1st. And basically to ensure that we can get everything done, you all have to vote to direct this thing to get sent to the treasurer next Tuesday. So they have their full amount of days to review and provide comments back.
So you have a whole week.
So I have another question, following along with Councilmember Sherman's, the risk reward. Mike, if things go south, I know that the city has other priorities as well. We're looking at wastewater treatment and other large capital improvement projects where we want to be able to prioritize some of the funds in the future. So how does this fit into the overall master plan for the city in terms of the risk and reward?
Well, I mean, as far as the risk and reward goes, this has been in our comprehensive plan since 18. It's been in our park plan since 18. The school district bought the land for the intermediate school out there. So really and given how tight the urban growth area is, and the fact that whether we like it or not, we're still in the countywide planning policies from the early 90s. This is the only area to grow in. I mean, the only other area would be Martin Airfield. Been talking with them. They want to keep it operating as an airfield. And with FAA restrictions, you aren't going to be developing most of that for anything else. So if you look at all of the plans that we've worked on over the last 6 years, this has been featured in all of those because that is the area to essentially develop in. And I would essentially say the main things that it would be impacting, if stuff went south, would be essentially street projects and the like that. But again, where we've been with that is we've also been successful trying to get other funds for that. With the utilities like the wastewater, the fact of the matter is we've been good getting appropriations and funding through ecology. There'll be a large agreement moving your way in the coming weeks on that one. So I mean, for a lot of your core do or die projects, we would still be able to do those. I think the risk by not doing this is that we're essentially showing that we aren't development ready. And I think that could have a very chilling effect on the future of the community, especially knowing that our neighbor is getting primed to do something identical. And frankly, the debt on what they're doing. So
No more teaching them what it's about.
yeah, well, I've not been doing that, don't worry about it. But the whole point is that South Myra side, the amount of debt they're gonna have to take out on that makes this look like chump change,
Yeah.
frankly. It's nowhere near it's beyond. So this one's the most cost-effective one. And I mean, with that land, it's also different elevations and stuff. So it's also, if we don't have some skin in the game, I think it's gonna be a major challenge to get that going in a timely manner.
So the alternative is not to incentivize any development in
Yeah.
College Place.
Well, yeah, and then you're gonna, what's gonna happen is it's gonna go to areas that do, and I mean, if we don't have a TIF, and then Walla Walla does, where do you think the development's gonna go to? I mean, it follows that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none. Mr. Stowe, thank you very much. This was an excellent presentation. We do appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Anything else? All right, have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna move on. Mr. Bolt, thank you so much for your patience. You are up to share about the blue zones.
This is where I should. Right up there.
Where you're coming in.
That's all. It was really weird hearing Mike and not being able to see him from over there. Like, I know what. Well, talking about, well-being and, economic vitality of a community is really critical to a community thriving and well-being. And so I think it's a good segue, talking about well-being in a bit broader sense that includes, economic development and housing and all that as well. So thanks for having me. Is that the PowerPoint that I provided to you right there, Sherry? Could you pull that up? Thanks. And it's just a PDF, but if you could go to the next slide. Like I said, thanks for having me here today. It was actually really interesting. Kitty and I were like, oh, wow, we learned really a lot tonight. Probably just scratched the surface.
Does it make you think we gotta move to College Place?
I live just south in the county. I can't afford to move anywhere right now. But I wanted to share with you, kind of where we're at with Blue Zones project right now. We're getting actually ready to enter into our third and final year of implementation. And when we first got started with the project back in 2021, we started with the community well-being assessment. And the survey tool we use for that is called the Real Age Test. And these are the results, high-level results from that community well-being assessment. We found there on the far right-hand side, those top risk factors we found by prevalence here in the community were stress, sitting for long periods of time. Usually when I present this, I'm like, okay, everybody, if you could stand up for the next 5 minutes while I present the rest of the slide. I won't do that to you right now, though. It's late. Low rates of exercise using weights, low fruit and vegetable consumption, and high BMI. All of those, those top 4 risk factors really compound a high BMI right there anyway. So anything we do to improve on the top 4 will improve high BMI. But that's really where we focused our efforts over the past, year and a half. And now we're getting ready to move into our 3rd year. And when we do that, we're resurveying the community through this community well-being assessment. Sherry, could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. And so our 2023 Real Age Test campaign is going right now. We started on January 2nd, and we're closing here in just under a week. We are well on our way to the target. Our goal was to get 500 surveys. We're already at 862 surveys, and that includes Walla Walla and College Place and by population. And our goal, kind of our team, we always like to set lofty goals. We're really trying to get as close to 1,000 as we can, just to say we did it. But we've met our goal already, which is nice. So we can have a statistically significant representation of the community to have, results that we can then apply community-wide. But College Place alone, we received 114 digital surveys as of last Friday, which is really great. And we also sent out paper surveys. Of just over, I think, 1,200 paper surveys were sent out. Did any of you receive one? No, okay. It comes in this big white envelope. It's funny, one of our team members did. I think one of our team members' husbands did as well. But we sent out just over 1,200. And I say we, it was not our team. It was our operating partner, Sharecare, who sends those out. But we sent out about 1,200 of those. So I hope that so my whole goal here is, I hope that you take it. Take the Real Age Test survey again, even if you took it the first time back in 2021, please take it again. The more information, the better. And what's kind of cool about the Real Age Test, I've worked in public health for a while now, and Norma, you could probably test this, working in the healthcare industry, is that a lot of times when you take a health survey, especially kind of one that's for community assessment, is it doesn't give you any information back. You fill it out, you send it in, you're done. Like, how did I do? What's cool with the Real Age Test is it actually it's an app that's called through Sharecare, which is our operating partner, and it actually gives you back your health information, and it also gives you some tips on how you can improve that. And
And that's kind of neat. I never have taken a well-being assessment like that before. I've done, you know, different surveys over the years and things like that, but it's kind of an additional tool that we have access to here locally while we're in our active business project implementation. So hope that you guys can do it. And I know we put it in the newsletter and shared it on social media, a lot of things like that. So I wouldn't say our campaign needs a push by any means, but the more the merrier, right? If you could go to the two slides down, because the next one is just, yeah, thank you. The next one was just an example of the campaign materials. But this is just what we're looking at right now with Blue Zones Project. We've been able to reach over 5,000 people in the community. We've hosted in partnership with community organizations. I'll say one thing that we do, we stress with Blue Zones Project is that we don't do anything alone. You know, it's not sustainable for us to do things alone. So we like to partner with organizations in the community, like City of College Place, to host events and programs, things like that. We've passed a lot of policies. College Place being there, I think College Place we're pretty much at have met certification criteria for the City of College Place before we even started our third year in terms of the number of policies that need to be passed in built environment, food, and tobacco policy. You know, we're working on a couple of those last ones as we enter into 2023, but I have no doubt that we will meet those likely before the summer. We've had some good media attention, and we've been able to bring in a decent amount of additional grant funding to the community. And that's not to Blue Zones Project. That's to organizations like the City College Place and applying for, supporting Mike. Mike's like grant application extraordinaire over here. Emily just provides a little bit more capacity to help apply for grants like projects like Lions Park and things like that. If you could go to the next slide, Chair, I appreciate it. I just wanted to highlight a few of the different policy areas that we've worked with the City of College Place on. One of them is the ADA transition plan. And what's really neat with this, is, really making it so that our community is accessible, which then promotes, the reduction of some of our top risk factors like stress, sitting for long periods of time, and high BMI. It gets people out and moving more, right? If something's accessible, it helps get people moving more. And so Emily was able to work with Mike on that ADA transition plan. And then could you go to the next one, please, Sharon? Thank you. And also working with the City of College Place and passing the Vision Zero policy, which is really focused on, having zero traffic fatality deaths. And that then goes to prevention, right? And so making it so that your streets and sidewalks are as safe as possible, which means also that people are more likely, community members are more likely to move naturally throughout their day, to walk places and ride their bikes and things like that. Not everybody is as brave as Mike to ride their bike all hours of the day in all sorts of places. But that Vision Zero policy will help ensure, that safety is a top priority, which we know it is for College Place. Can you go to the next one, please? And linked to that is also we were able to work with Davis School District and Public Works on a Safe Routes to School demonstration project. Davis has been a great school to work with. Katie and Emily work with Davis quite a bit. But to really identify that Davis didn't have an updated Safe Routes to School map and plan, and so to work with the transportation department at College Place Public Schools and Public Works to have that in place, so then students can and their parents feel safe walking or biking to school. It also helps with a little bit of a traffic issue that they have over on Dragon Drive sometimes. My kids don't go to Davis, but I've heard that sometimes there can be a little bit of a bottleneck. At times. But more they can get kids moving naturally to school, walking and biking to school, things like that. Fewer cars that are over there. And so that's a goal with that policy. You could go to the next slide, please, Sherry. I'd appreciate it. Thank you. And so Katie is our org lead, and she works with schools, work sites, restaurants, and grocery stores, like we've shared before. And we've been, doing a lot of work with organizations here at College Place to make healthy choices easier. The City of College Place was one of the first approved work sites here in the Walla Valley, the first here in the City of College Place. And you see here that we've been able to work with different schools to become Blue Zones approved schools, which really is all about, you know, prioritizing well-being and helping to implement some of the great policies that they already have in place within the schools and work sites, but then also, you know, maybe making some little adjustments and improvements around the environments as well, where people learn and work. And with, you know, restaurants and grocery stores, really the goal is to have healthy choices available when we go out to eat and when we're at the grocery store. And we're so lucky here in the Walla Walla Valley that we have a plethora of restaurants, that's for sure. But Rogers Bakery right here on College Avenue was our first approved restaurant, and Kelly Lean has been so much fun to work with. And now, after she's approved, that's really the foundation, right? Now the goal is to help get the word out about her healthy options. And I gotta say, her veggie deluxe sandwich is delicious. You can go to the next slide, please. And I'm just about done too. This is just highlighting the city of College Place doing their first approved work site here in College Place, and offering several different you know, programs to your workforce here, which is a lot of fun. You know, Katie's always excited to get invited back. And now, like we talked about before the meeting started, the goal is that you won't need us, right? You won't need us, you know, the Blue Build Project team to continue on this well-being work and making healthy choices easier. Really, you do it yourselves, you know, by offering healthy snacks at meetings and promoting well-being and de-stressing and having, you know, practicing mindfulness and stuff like that. You won't need us. It just becomes part of the culture and ingrained in the culture of the work that you do. If you could go to the next slide, please, Lisa. Thank you. And so really, you know, we've got, these are, well, we have one of these events. So we actually have a cooking class going right now. And I think it's probably our biggest cooking class.
62 people are there.
62 people over at Providence.
It's about cabbage. The whole thing.
But then wanting to know, what am I supposed to do with it?
Transform this head of cabbage into something delicious. And that's what it's all about. We are, you know, low fruit and vegetable consumption is kind of that like, oh my gosh, how do we have this in this, you know, agricultural mecca of the Walla Walla Valley? But sometimes it's just taking that, you know, produce that we have right here and transforming it into something that tastes good, that our kids want to eat, that our family wants to eat, you know. And so we've been hosting cooking classes really throughout the community here at College, City of College Place as well. Right here in this room, Katie did a cooking class with the fire department. But the goal is just to help people make healthier choices, and it's been so much fun. And as we look, you know, as we start our third year, we're really now looking at sustainability and what does well-being, transformation, and improvement look like in the Walla Walla Valley once we become a Blue Zone certified community in April of 2024. And Mike is on our steering committee, as is Heather, representing the City of College Place. And as we figure some of those pieces out, and after we get our new community well-being assessment results back and create our last year's strategic plan, I'll hope to be able to come back and share some more with you all, and to kind of dream and strategize on what that could look like for the City of College Place. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I know you guys have a full agenda.
Thank you.
Thanks for making time.
Thank you. Let's just go quickly to council members to see if there's any questions or comments. Member Jessup.
I have a thank you comment, so thank you, honestly, for all the hard work and stuff implementing it. Personally, I have a vested interest in safe schools safe walk to schools and that kind of stuff. And I also was curious, if you guys are already doing this, I apologize if I missed something. But in the conversation of Vision Zero policies, if you guys been having that conversation or ideas or so on and so forth regarding roundabouts? I know we've had that conversation with families and visually impaired and so on and so forth. Have you guys had a lot of experience with that? Have we had that conversation?
Yeah, well, so actually that's timely. We're actually are going to be working, Emily's going to be working with the City of Walla Walla and with Valley Transit, I think, to be doing some safety videos around the new roundabouts that the City of Walla Walla is putting in. But one of those videos also is going to be, they're going to be partnering with the Walla Walla County Accessible Communities Advisory Committee. Only reason I can remember that is because I helped create it. On the exact things that you're talking about. A lot of times we think about physical mobility and accessibility, but not necessarily hearing impaired and vision impaired. And roundabouts are some of the most dangerous infrastructure improvements for those who are vision and hearing impaired. And so bringing them into that picture too, to see how we can make them safer. And largely that's around driver awareness with that, because sometimes if you see on a roundabout, I am terrible at this. I go into that roundabout over there on 9th Street, I don't always pay attention if there's somebody right there in the crosswalk. It's not the first thing that I look at. Usually I'm looking just to make sure there's no car coming. And so a lot of it's driver awareness. Katie, what do you think to add?
Well, I'm just gonna say that, on this topic, so the Built Environment Committee that meets once a month, the roundabout on 9th and Plaza or Highway 11 or the big roundabout, about, oh gosh, a month or two after it had opened, that committee was meeting, and that committee is composed of people from the county, Department of Transportation statewide, city leaders, and then also just, you know, caring citizens. A number of which mentioned, you know, when you're driving up, one of the signs was perfectly blocking the flashing beacon. And so if a pedestrian has hit the beacon as they're instructed to do to be able to cross safely, someone in a car may not be able to see that beacon is, and so it's giving some of that feedback. And actually the city made adjustments to the signage and has added additional flashing beacons at that roundabout so that it becomes even more pedestrian and bicyclist safe. So that's been a really great place for community members to provide feedback, and actually it's been acted on. And so I think trying to provide some more of that feedback ahead of when those roundabouts are opening as well, because it's tough. The roundabouts are, they say they're the safest traffic revision for some groups, but they're the least safe for others. And so trying to figure out how we find that.
But I think that that's also part of maybe is that at all part of like kind of with Vision Zero, and also like the transportation plan and things like that, as roundabouts are dreamt about and installed to think about some of those implications for here.
And I would say in the near term, there really are no plans for roundabouts in the city. The only one where an engineer recommended, but it's gonna be a ways out before we have this fully funded, would be like when 12th Street is redone, the 12th and Larch intersection. The engineering report a couple of years ago said that was like the optimal treatment for that. Really, where the city's gonna have to get a position on what roundabouts will be whenever the state finds money for 125, because they've communicated in the future they want to convert all the signalized intersections on the highway portion of 125 from Myra to State Line to a series of roundabouts.
So you're talking about like Meadowbrook and
Meadowbrook, College Avenue,
And what kind of
Commercial Drive.
Commercial Drive?
Yeah,
Well, that would be an adventure.
yeah.
But thank you.
Councilmember Cleveland,
No questions. I think you guys are enough to go.
Councilmember Espinosa,
No questions, thank you.
Councilmember Peterson.
You know, I would just say the blue zone originally, when you talk about Loma Linda and some of these other areas, it's interesting. It's you know, we're talking about traffic accidents at roundabouts, but we're also talking about lifestyle changes from birth and education, of how you have active people in their 90s and whatnot that are still enjoying, life like many people in their 60s and 70s. And so that communication that gets out, I think, is so important. Diet, exercise, resting the mind and soul.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, communication, especially with our senior population.
Yeah.
It's, something that we're working on doing working with the aging or long-term care organization here in the Department of Community Health on a healthy aging survey, a community survey for seniors to kind of see, you know, what's the best way to get information to them. Sometimes, a lot of times, you know, we work a lot with the senior center and Brian there at the senior center because it's a natural hub. We feel like definitely, and then individually with a lot of the long-term care facilities in town, but kind of reaching out to the senior community here within the valley to ask them what's the best way that you'd like to have information, gather your information, but then also what information would you like, and what gaps maybe are there in services that they're accessing to, so we can get them some.
And I guess my point also was though from birth, it's not just education of healthy diet.
So one example actually that just started yesterday, to your point, is at Davis Elementary, they are transitioning to what's called offer versus serve in their cafeteria. So they have a record number of students getting school lunch and breakfast this year. The food has had a complete transition and is really fantastic, and students are excited to eat it. And so on Monday, they started what's called offer versus serve, which instead of going up and getting your tray and everybody gets carrots, everybody gets the exact same thing. They're sort of what they're transitioning to is students having to pick between, you have to take a vegetable or a fruit, but you get to pick which one you want. And so it's not only teaching them and exposing them to different fruits and vegetables, but also a life skill of saying, okay, which one do I want? And talking them through even at the kinder level, and so it's apparently going really well, and giving the students a little bit more options to start to form some of their opinions and whatnot around having positive associations with fruits and vegetables, and being excited to eat them. And so, that's starting, thinking about kind of both ends of the spectrum. That's just one thing they're doing at the elementary level, but starting early.
Yeah, good, thank you.
So not fruit, vegetable talkies. Just.
No talkies. No talkies.
Not to get it on a soapbox, but it's one of these things where I think many of us in society, it's what have you been taught to eat, right? And what's difficult.
Right.
And there are things where I know just recently, I noticed it wasn't on your list, but Graves, where you're looking at a vegetarian sandwich and some of these other items that you can eat. And what's interesting is breaking through that barrier sometimes with individuals, because they try it, and they try it and they like it, and not nothing that's going to be life changing, but it's one of those things that you to break through that barrier, I guess, of what's expected to eat or whatnot is not expected to eat.
Well, like one of the best practices we work on with restaurants, and Grace being one of them, is when they look at their pricing, not pricing a vegetarian sandwich or a plant-based sandwich or entree, I should say, at a higher rate than animal protein, right? Because it just immediately that would mean it was not an option for some people. And so you're trying to eliminate some of those barriers. So it's that much easier to make a healthy choice. And something, like at Rogers Bakery, one of the small changes they made was they kind of reorganized their menu. So each section, the top items started with the healthiest. We didn't take any items off the menu. They have all, still have the donuts, everything is still there, but the things at the top of each section start with the healthiest items. Maybe it's a plant-based item, maybe it's not, but it's just a healthier, more vegetable-based item. Or using different words to describe them. Again, just making it more appealing and a little bit easier for folks to find those healthy options if they choose to take them.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Councilmember Sherman?
I don't have any questions. I just always appreciate the updates from you guys.
All right, well, thank you both very much. Really appreciate it.
Yes.
Appreciate the work you're doing.
Of course.
Help yourself to some healthy snacks on the way out.
We're feeling guilty now, except for
Oh,
one.
There's plenty there. So do help yourselves. Have a good night. All right, so next item, Mr. Ricker's going to present on City Hall edition. John, you're up.
Live from City Hall. So, Yeah, I decided it would be better if I did this remotely, just so I can kind of give you a tour of the plans more easily than in person. So, real quick, we currently have a contract with Meyer Architecture and Engineering. We're the design firm that was selected to do the council room renovation in AV project. And we had a phase 2 of that contract, which was to do a full design for renovation, for remodel and addition of the jail cell area and the Sally Port behind the council chambers. And so after we got the council chamber renovation project underway with Nelson Construction, we internally staff with Mr. Rizzatello and Mayor Hernandez were talking about staffing and thinking about long-term what our needs were. And roughly from an administration standpoint and adding staff here at City Hall, there's a need for somewhere between probably 5 to 7 additional staffing people. And some of that could be bringing in like our public works inspector and getting his office into this building so we can have a better line of communication, or it is new staff. So with that in mind, I asked Mike if we could get a proposal from Meyer to give us a conceptual rendering of what an addition would look like on the west side of the building where we have all of that yard area. And incidentally, the original construction drawings, and I'll show you one of the sheets that shows this, anticipated an addition on that side of the building, on the west side of the building. So that's the area where we focused adding more office space, but there's also an addition on the northeast corner of the building where the Sally Port is and the jail cell area is at. And so anyhow, we talked with Mayor Hernandez and Mike and I, we went ahead and got a contract with Meyer to do some conceptual drawings for us and also give us an idea of what the space, what the estimated cost would be to do an addition. And that was under Mike's purview, under his authorization. So we went ahead and did that, went through that exercise last summer and fall. And so now we have a proposal to you to go ahead and do that full design in 2023. It was budgeted for. And so without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and let's see, let's get the right one.
Well, we have a nice big picture of you.
Oh gosh, I better back up then. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the existing layout of City Hall with the council chambers, what it'll look like. And you guys have seen this when we went through that process. So we'll start down here, kind of the lobby. That's going to be some upgrades as part of the council chamber renovation. So I'm not sure how many of you have been into the intersanctum behind the public lobby. I'm sure you've all with Mike. Norma doesn't really have an office since COVID, and adding some staff. So, but anyhow, I'm going to take you through my door over here on the right side or the east side of the building, and this is community development. So this is where Robert McAndrews' office is at. Ree's office is over here, my office. We issue building permits, right-of-way permits. And so my office is here. This is where our administrative assistant is at our front window. Mike's or Robert's office is here. We have our copier room here. We also have a little cubicle set up in here for like an intern. And then we have our stormwater person in this office here. Our break room has, when we brought Ree on, we had to find a space for her. So Ree is the only office that has a wet bar, and it's actually a filing cabinet. She has files piled up in her sink. So we don't have a break room over on this side. And then the office next to Ree's is where our building official and building inspector, they share an office. And then you get back into where the jail cells were at. And they're still back there. We still have the stainless steel toilets in each, I almost call them offices. And so we use them as storage. We've got files in there. We've got this first one is used for facility equipment, tools and whatnot. And then you come back around and we have the old Sallyport area. And then in order to get over to the other side, if you were wanting to use the back way, you have to go into the council chambers and then over towards where Mike's office is at. And then the break room, we have our Sherry's office is here, and then the deputy clerk's office is next to her, and then HR is here. This is where all of our newsletters get put together in our billing. Out in the hallway, it gets really loud when that's going on, when the copier is in full swing. We have our finance director's office is here. Deputy finance director Desharie's office is here. Our utility clerk, and then accounts payable. So all told, full-time, 5 days a week, we have 15 people in this building roughly. Sometimes we have 16 when our IT department's here, maybe 17 if we have an intern. But we don't have really any room to expand additional staff. We do have a full basement, and I won't go through that area, but we don't have an elevator, so there's no restrooms down there. So we use it for evidence storage is down there for the police department. Our server rooms are down there. We have flat file, paper files, but it's mainly storage. So now I'll go ahead and show you what Meyer has come up with. So going back into my side of the office, you can see the office that the building official is sharing, that kind of corner gets taken out of it, and then the 3 jail cells get eliminated and turned into basically 3 offices back there. And then we have and this does include a small addition underneath the existing roof line to make these offices deep enough. We get a corridor out of it with some storage, and coffee machine could be back there. Little water cooler, coffee area for this side of the building, and then Mike's office would be in the northeast corner. We get a conference room, rather large one, and then the mayor's office would be back here as well. That storage area behind council becomes a corridor, so now we can easily flow from one side of the building to the other without having to go through the lobby, or without having to go into the council room, which we often use that as a conference room as well, or there could be a presentation going on there, or a council meeting. So, or many of our other various meetings that we hold in that space. So Mike's existing office becomes a corridor. We reconfigure the break room and actually add some space to it, and also add some outdoor space behind a fence, so that since we lost our break room over on the east side, we're making this one bigger. So because we're adding office space. Coming back into the existing part of the building, Sherry's office stays the same, but we eliminate a couple of Sean's office, HR, and the deputy clerk's office. That becomes a workspace and a corridor. Along each side of, so this is the main 2,600 square foot addition roughly. We add 8 offices, a lounge, and then 2 conference rooms that could be made into a larger conference room. Now this middle area, I think if we do enter into a contract to do full design, we'll probably focus on this area in such a way that how could it be repurposed in, let's say, 10 years from now, if we need to add, let's say, cubicles or something. So we want to anticipate that maybe this area might have to get repurposed to add, if we need to add staffing levels, but so this is the main area of the addition. The proposal does include design for renovating the public restrooms, and there's 3 restrooms that are for staff. Renovating those, basically upgrading, replacing tile and fixtures. They're, date back to the original when the building was of course, data infrastructure would be new data into the addition, expanding our card lock system to cover all of our doors, things like that. I'll go ahead and just quickly kind of show you what the exterior, there's the roof line. That's what it would look like from Google. And then your exterior elevations, this is looking on the east side, the back door in, and the addition, there's Mike's window for his office, another doorway out the back. The south elevation, so this is the front of the existing city hall, and you see the addition on the west side. This is looking at the west addition, so we're sticking with the same architectural style of the original building. One thing that also this design would include is we have a number of exposed rafters on the front of City Hall that they're a glulam product, and when the building was originally built, there was no flashing on top of those glulam beams, and they have seen better days. When we redid the roof, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, and put metal on it, we did put flashing over the tops of those to try to stop the rot, but they need to be repaired, and so there'll be some sort of repair for those, and probably some sort of translucent, like skylight sort of system that would go over the top of them instead of them being exposed. But and then there's a 3D view of the front and the west addition. Schematic design. So I mentioned that there was an engineer's estimate to go through the design process and construction. So we're looking at roughly for the addition area and remodel. So the addition's roughly $247 a square foot. The remodel $125 a square foot. Some site development costs for roughly 1.5 million for hard costs for the addition and remodel. Then you have the contractor's profits and other things that get worked into that, and now we're at almost 2 million. And then the architectural engineering fees, contract construction management, which is what's in the proposal, is another 197,000 roughly. And then there's these 2 lines down here at the very bottom that are really big numbers. And one of them is a construction cost escalator. And they're adding 26% to the overall cost at 500,000. And then a schematic design contingency. So what this is, and I put the note there because it's like, what is that? Aren't we going through the design process? So what this is because this estimate's based on a schematic, they're throwing a contingency in there to account for design changes, so that number, hopefully that number gets smaller, and we don't see that once we get into full design, but there's a contingency there. So we're looking at, $3 million potentially to do this addition and renovation. I think so. The Meyer proposal is attachment 3, and the total cost for phase 2A is roughly $197,000. That includes $159,000 for the design process, and then another $4,000 for bidding, and then another $34,000 for construction administration. And then lastly, I will show you the addition that they were looking at back when the building was in design back in the early 90s. Much smaller addition, but we can go out about 44, 45 feet behind sidewalk. So, any questions?
Before we go through council members, Mike has
Yeah.
some additional.
Yeah, so just as a refresher, tying everything back to our A1 documentations. We have essentially architecture, engineering, placeholder and capital facility plan for this year, and then planning on future years, next year and a year beyond that, to be doing stuff with the municipal campus. That was in the administration line, because as we went through this before, your typical city halls have a conference room, they have an office for the mayor, the city attorney's not in a break room and stuff. And basically what this brings to life is the original plan from 1992 when this was built. Because and I talked to former council member Nyhaven about this. They were planning to do it back then, but they were doing this via a council Manic bond that was voted on by a council. And it was just bond limit at the time because there wasn't a Walmart, there wasn't a Home Depot. So the assessed valuation in town was a lot lower. So we got what we got. It's definitely served its purpose, and we're reusing what we have and adding on to it on the existing land. So
I see that it's adding 8 new offices. What is it gonna do, if anything at all, for handicap accessible? Because we don't exactly have a handicap friendly hallways and kind of turns. Is it gonna make any accommodations?
I know they were designed with all the current codes in mind. We will ask to make sure that they're on the because I know there is going to be an update to the building code cycle, so it'll be all within the current.
So wider doors, wider
It'll
hallways.
be within the building codes at the time.
Great.
Yeah, we can go ahead and, so we have been doing ADA accessibility upgrades over the years. For instance, now our doors are.
John, we can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Okay, you were just sounding like you were far away. We could hear you, but we couldn't understand you.
Oh, okay. I will try to
Oh,
speak
there.
more clearly. I'm sorry. Yeah. So our hallways are ADA compliant. We do kind of have this catacomb-like experience from the original design, and some of that will be hard to, do away with. But we most certainly can look at things like adding ADA doors that automatically can open, so we don't struggle to hold the door open when we have to bring somebody back into the catacomb
Right.
of the building with it's somebody that's in a wheelchair or whatnot, and make sure that our public restrooms are ADA compliant, things like that.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Jessup, questions or comments?
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Cleveland?
Looks great. Looking forward to it. One question I did have is that stairwell the only way in and out of the basement?
Yeah.
So are we gonna do something to address, a secondary egress in case there's some sort of fire?
To be frank with the basement, the way that thing is designed, that merely needs to be for storage and stuff like that, because the way. I don't wanna go too far into it because of the materials down there, but the way the building is designed, it would make it very difficult to put in a secondary egress in there. And especially with the sensitive materials down there, we need to be very careful about that. I'll just couch it there.
It is code compliant for storage down there. We are not based on the way we.
Yeah.
Can you not hear me?
Yeah. Just notify the fire department
Yeah.
every time you're thinking of going down.
Councilmember Espinosa?
No questions.
Councilmember Peterson?
And the heading build it and they will come. This expansion is for how many more FTEs?
Well, it's 8 new offices, and so that would mean Reed gets an actual office, the mayor would get an
And you
actual
get an
office.
actual office.
So that opens 6 new spaces.
We end up with a net of 8 additional office spaces. By the time you reconfigure the lost office spaces that we have, yeah, it
So
ends up.
what are the
net
plan
of
for those empty offices?
So I mean, the plan for empty offices really follows longer term as the community grows from a couple of years ago. And I don't know if folks on council remember this, but back when previous mayor was here, there was like a prioritization of positions as the community grows and so forth. And basically it follows that. Whereas you have additional housing, you need another inspector and what have you. Likewise, public records, things of that sort, and then inspections. So really it follows all of that to encompass that. And we're trying to do it in the most cost-effective manner, which is essentially adding to what we have and not having to build new, because the bones of the building are good. It's just right now everyone's on top of each other.
Okay. Councilmember Sherman?
Is construction not happening in council chambers while this is being discussed?
The council
it-
chamber it is under construction.
Okay.
They're
I
not
thought
working
we
right
were
now.
Oh, they're not there right now at 7 o'clock when we should, yeah. Okay, that's what I thought, but I was like, well, wait, now if we're talking about a bigger expansion, is that gonna be on hold? And obviously lots of changes to accommodate that, but just clarifying.
This follows the capital facility plan in which the council chambers was getting dealt with now and the rest later.
Got it. Thank you.
There's 2 sources of funds
Yeah.
basically for that, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why.
Okay, you do the AV stuff.
Yeah, the AV stuff, that's all going on now, and that was within ARPA, and then city funds, and then this was gonna be, some debt issuance and also energy efficiency grants and some other building grants that the state has.
It just all sounds like job security for Mr. Rickard. Thank you.
I desperately need this to happen so I can request a planner.
Yeah, well, and you really don't have enough going on. Awesome, thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments before we move on? Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Broadband Action Team, Mr. Rizzatello.
Okay, a lot of this stuff is just for your information, and I'll be brief about it. So, broadband action team, so federal government, across countries giving out about $42 billion to revamp the broadband systems across the country. They finally issued how they're actually going to distribute it. which they're requiring the states to work with local jurisdictions to develop BATs. It's called Broadband Action Teams. And the port is collaborating with Community Council. Community Council will be the one shepherding this, but they're gonna develop our local county-wide BAT with WSU Extension Assistance, and they're gonna develop a plan that says areas that are unserved, which essentially is like below the 25 megabits per second, and then areas that are underserved, which is under 300. And College Place has several of the under 300, including my former neighborhood and other areas. So they're gonna do a mapping exercise across the town. It's very condensed timeline. This whole thing for the entire county has to be done in 4 months. They're gonna have their first meeting, if anyone wanted to attend, it's Friday, 8:30 down at the airport, the conference room, to constitute the BAT, and it's gonna be a very quick turnaround, but the plan's gonna have to get, put together, approved, and then turned into the state within a 4-month time period, because the feds are gonna release a substantial amount of money, but it's gonna be a one-time thing. If you miss the boat, you're basically forever out of luck at that point. So this is very important. I want to make sure you were all aware of it.
Okay. And 8:30 AM, I'm
Yeah.
assuming?
Yep.
Okay. All right, any questions regarding that? Councilmember Peterson?
So Mike, is this they're meeting where?
The Port of the Walla, the airport building
So,
where they have the
right.
EDAC meetings.
So is this activity a shared or a county-wide?
It's gonna be countywide, yes.
Countywide, okay.
Because each county has to have a
Got it,
BAT.
okay, got it, okay.
And we actually, through the community council internet study, it's going on now, and I'm on that. It was found that our county didn't get a BAT going, and several others nearby, including Columbia County, already have a fully functioning one, so we need to get on that
Yeah,
now.
Got it.
All right. Councilmember Sherman or Espinosa, any questions?
No questions.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Yep.
All right, next is the economic development flyers for 2023.
Okay, so same exercise we usually do every year where we update the data, the flyers are broken out by business districts. So downtown, the Myra Road corridor, and then Meadowbrook, Stone Creek. Esri, which is where we get our data from, they redid things now where it basically demonstrates the amount of purchasing power in categories that exist within the 45-minute range. So a lot of it is no surprise as you go through the flyers, but clothing, groceries in general, the gas convenience stores, there's a large gap that is unmet right now. Good news is that our population, as you get to that 45-minute drive time, continues to grow above the 70,000, which is the magic number to get the regional players at. So that's really good. This year, we also have a flyer for residential developers that has some key data. And then available site data. But take a look at, if you have any questions, let me know. We'll be seeking approval from council to use these as the documents next meeting, because we need to get these ready to go for our Vegas trip to go get the retailers in May. So we have to get this published soon. In the Economic Development Commission, they recommended approval of this last night.
They're really well done.
Oh, thanks.
Well done, Mark. And the way they're separated makes it really easy to see it. Questions or comments from Mike? No, no one online. All right, take a look at those flyers. If you have any questions, please contact Mike ASAP. All right, next, Ms. Colwell.
Yes.
District Court Services.
Thank you, Mayor. Just by way of background, the city is required to provide services to the public of prosecuting crimes, gross misdemeanors and misdemeanors under state code adopted by the city or by city enacted code, crimes that the city has made, acts that the city has made criminal. We used to have our own jail, as you know. We used to have our own municipal court to handle all the prosecution. In 2013, we joined the city of Walla Walla and the county of Walla Walla for the county to provide all services through their district court. I have been now practicing on behalf of College Place since May of 2018. And I, along with Mike, I think Norma's aware of some of the problems. Chief Tamaris, were having difficulty getting justice in district court. In a nutshell, there's a certain, well, it's expanding, but basically it's known that you can commit theft in College Place. You can drive with a suspended license and pretty much anything, and yet there are no consequences or very, very little consequences. There's a lot of things that go into my opinion that justice isn't being served. But I'll give you an example of a case. And this isn't the most egregious, but I picked it. This is an assault 4 charge, a misdemeanor assault. It's domestic violence. So it they were boyfriend, girlfriend, but basically living together. They have children together. It was charged, it occurred November of 2018. Currently, there's a bench warrant out for the defendant. We have had 39 hearings. He has shown up for 11 of those. There have been 7 bench warrants issued for him not appearing in court. Each time he's picked up on those warrants, he's either picked up and released by the judge. He comes in and pays a warrant fee of $100 and they don't arrest him and they give him another court date. She doesn't show up too. We have set trial, which is kind of this case needs to go forward. We set a trial date. It's happened 4 times and he doesn't show up for trial. So the trial gets stricken and a warrant goes out. And this is a victim that I've been in contact with, and she wonders why he is not being held accountable. And there's nothing, I've tried everything that I can think of. I've filed a request for the judge to impose bail as a condition of release. So either the person has the funds and can post bail. Usually it's $500, $1,000. That's incentive for them to come back, because if they don't, then that gets forfeited. We often see either if it's a male defendant, we see the mother or the grandmother or the sister coming in to pay that $100 warrant fee, so they don't get arrested. It's just what they do. Yes. If you are convicted, there are conditions of your sentence that you have to abide by. Pay your fine if you have one, pay restitution. Sometimes it's obtain substance abuse treatment or mental health treatment. It's also always don't commit any more crimes. We see probation violations and we see no consequence for that probation violation. I am no longer, Judge Knowlton was the judge who was presiding over College Place. He's no longer the judge. But basically his thought was, if I make you come to court to explain why you haven't done what you're supposed to do, that's punishment enough. And if you do what you're supposed to do, you don't have to come to court anymore. Well, it just doesn't work. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating for law enforcement. I know they are discouraged because what they are doing, what does it really mean?
On top of everything else. It's
Right. We have met with the presiding judge, which is Judge Deed. I met with him once without Mike and once with Mike, and the chief of Walla Walla Police Department. And Judge Hadeen acted surprised by what we were saying and couldn't understand it. It got better for a couple weeks and then it would go right back to where it was before. So we're kind of at our wits' end as to what to do. What we can do is disengage and create our own city court. It would be more expensive than what we're paying for now. But it's an option. I met today with Tim Donaldson, who is the city attorney for Walla Walla. And he was the one that really championed this combined court. And it works. I mean, the court staff is great. The probation officers are great. Security is great. You know, the scheduling is great. All of that, it's just the outcome of the cases and the handling of the cases. And I expressed this to Tim, and he no longer is the criminal prosecutor. He has an assistant who's been doing that for years. And I think he was taken aback. I think he wants to advocate on our behalf. I think it might be what better taken from Tim. I mean, he's been here a long time. I think he has a reputation that he might get somewhere. And the bottom line is, if we pull out, it's going to be bad for the county and it's going to be bad for the city. It's going to cost them a lot more to do those services.
You say the city as in Walla Walla?
Yeah. Because right now, we pretty much split a 3-3-3
Yeah.
on like the building and things like that. And then it's weighted based on the number of cases we have. So that's the gist of it.
And I can provide some linear notes to it as well, just because I mean, this is a pretty monumental
big.
statements
Yeah.
being made here, but I mean, over years, we've tried to engage at various points on various cases in a very professional manner. And even on some of the emails where you were seeking justice, there were interesting responses from the bench, and then I get CC'd, then all of a sudden the fellow in question acts normally. And so we're putting a statement out to you because we're hoping that through having this public discourse, through working with Mr. Donaldson and the folks to be, and the fact that Judge Knowlton was changed over, but you still have the same head judge, that there will be better outcomes. I just want to put stuff on notice because I'll say as a city manager, even suggesting this is very counterintuitive. But when you have the contract with the county, the judge is whoever runs and is elected, and even if they do really bizarre stuff, pretty much it is what it is. If you ran your own court, essentially it goes through an approval and confirmation process similar to department heads for judges and so forth. Where there is that lever, because when I worked at City of Colfax, and this is going to be very counterintuitive, because Colfax, the county and the court are actually right across the street from each other, and Colfax had their own court because of similar issues. So we're going to try to urge that there is a common level of understanding and appropriate interpretation and justice, but things I would say have risen to a level, especially with something happen, and I'm not gonna go into a specific case, but those around near Christmas time, I'll just say we're aware of a certain case. And it's to the point where it needs to be known, just so if you do see it, that's the rationale behind it. Because frankly, I know on a professional level, and from what I've seen, I'm quite disturbed by what's been going on, and I'll couch it there.
So I've been involved in conversations as well with Mike Henry, and the case Mike's talking about, I think that was my last, it's like, why? And they're like, well, because, right? And they gave me the understanding of why we're now in this situation. So I just wanted to also just put it out there that I do support taking action if we do not find justice for the citizens of College Place. Because it's just becoming a reputational issue as well, that you can do whatever you want in College Place. And nothing's gonna happen. The cops will arrest you and nothing will happen. You literally be used within hours by the judges. Right?
Yeah, and I think that we're not just coming here. We're not just coming here to complain.
Yeah.
I have ideas. And it's almost like they're their own worst enemy when, you know, a person had, 15 driving with license suspended charges, and it's because they haven't been paying child support. And I asked for 15 days, one for each. And the judge says in the courtroom, well, we only normally give 1 day for this. I mean, there's zero incentive for them to not drive again. I would like to fast track domestic violence and DUI cases because they get 3 opportunities to show up for arraignment before a warrant is issued. So sometimes we have a domestic violence case that's 6-7 months out before they even have their first hearing. We could just kind of go
Yeah,
on.
they go on for years sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we pay, and right? And meanwhile, citizens are out there, the ones that are innocent end up sometimes becoming the victims of these people who don't end up getting through the justice system because they just keep getting allowed to be sitting outside. And we gotta put a stop to that, right? And
And we have people coming from outside the area. I see a lot of Tri-Cities people coming here because they're held accountable for thefts from Walmart in Tri-Cities, but not here.
so, yeah, let's just go for any questions or comments.
Yeah.
Councilmember Jessup.
Well, I have 1,000 questions because I'm curious, just because.
And I'd be happy to talk to anyone individually too.
Sure. Sure. Which I love to just not add anything poignant or being insensitive, just curiosity. So I think if I remember correctly, there's always like legislative kind of puts forth, like, these are the things in which you need to pay attention to by statute when doing criminal cases and so on and so forth. I assume we still have that here, like it goes
Yes.
down to our level. So again, not poignant, but just a couple of questions. When you look at how much this costs the judges and so on and so forth, and then having your own court versus what are you losing by theft? So I can just hear in the back of my head, sorry, I'm coming from an educational background too. You go, hey, something happens, this happened, whatever. So they say, well, how much of the harm was caused by this theft versus how much it's going to cost you to have your own separate judge in court? And so there's always that question out there.
So Mike can talk to, or I'll reiterate what Mike has told me, Walmart. Our Walmart is the second highest loss by theft in the state. The first is
I see-
Everett,
I
I think it's Everett,
Yeah.
and they're next to a homeless shelter. And so they associate, I don't know if it's true, but they associate it with that.
Sure.
And so when a big box store comes to look at, do we want to be in this community? They look at Walmart's loss from theft.
It's over $1 million, right?
Yeah. So
So
there
that's great.
are ramifications beyond, and Walmart doesn't call the cops on everyone.
Yeah.
If someone's caught, I think I had one where it was a family and the children were eating the food from the deli and walked out. I didn't choose to prosecute that case. So I think, say, trust me, but if you want to talk
Sure,
more about
that's
the level of prosecution. Yeah.
So again, not being insensitive, just
No.
like I've tried to say, okay, well, if
These
you're
are the
gonna make this cost, then how much are we losing versus, so that just a second alone, just that alone,
Mhm.
don't even need to see the numbers. What then does that look like to have your own or to break away? Practically speaking, like who is it that's being then appointed or elected?
It would be appointed, and
And where would they be?
it would be appointed and essentially in like council chambers. It would be a judge that would come and essentially adjudicate, the cases likely part-time.
So they would be responsible to that.
Yeah, and then prosecuting.
Accountable.
And then prosecution wise, it would still fall and then public defender, we pay for that right now. We have the independent contracts on that, so that would very much look the same. It would basically be the cost of the judge and then also just given the system onto the judicial, there's like a judicial computer system, in Colfax.
Okay.
We have access to it. And I'm the first to admit, it's definitely a pain initially. But it can be done. And I'm just putting out there because in the contract renewal for the court with the county, we're putting in some enabling language where there's a review of things. And we're gonna try to solve this in a manner where hopefully it'll be improved within that system, because I'm not for doing our own thing from a cost benefit perspective. It makes sense, but we also need to make sure it's functioning properly.
Yeah.
And just so it doesn't look like we're off doing some weird wild goose chase. That's why I wanted to put this out in front of you, so you're aware as to the rationale and the why.
So we can connect the dots.
Yeah.
And two more issues there. We, to disengage with them, we have to provide notice. I think it's February 1st, the year before the next election for district court judge. So we just started a new 4-year period. So we have some time. I have a new judge. I don't know if he's going to preside yet over College Place or if it's going to be the presiding judge, Judge Hadid. So right now we have time to monitor and hopefully we'll get some movement.
Are you saying 4 years?
4 years.
So
Do we have 3 years?
So basically, a little less than 3 years, we'd have to give notice that we want to get out.
but if we give notice immediately, when is the transition?
So it's every 4 years.
So every-
It has-
okay.
Yeah, and the reason for that is they had some groups go sideways. And it was very expensive for everyone, and so they built into the statute.
Got it.
The.
Yeah.
So we couldn't pull out any earlier than 3 years?
No, not unless we convince them that they should let us go.
Right.
What does that then mean in terms of like, well, of course, if you're prosecuting, that can mean various things, I assume, you know, in terms of fines, probation, so on and so forth. But I have to assume then that also means jail time or cell space.
Correct,
Really?
and we have a contract with the Walla County Jail right now.
And that's a separate
Yeah, it's a
contract,
separate
so it's not, it isn't like we'd have to build our own jail or something, because that's separate contract and a separate thing, so.
Right, and we could do a community court, we could do a lot of court programs that we're not doing now if we wanted to do that.
Councilmember Cleveland?
Aside from the monetary cost, there can be pretty high and lifelong costs to not getting the justice that you deserve.
Right.
So some of our options you mentioned are potentially doing community court.
Mhm.
Would that be a joint venture like the city of Walla Walla, or is that like our own individual?
We could, everything's on the table, yeah, everything's on the table.
What about something along the lines of making a new building for the police station and including a space for?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it could be, and all of that requires a long timeline for planning, which is why we're coming before you to get this on your radar, because again, we hope they're gonna be cooperative and change course, but I'll just say after the events that occurred in December and discussions in the community with people, it's enough of a fever pitch where it had to be brought up to council.
Plus, they're not often very nice when to read. I mean, but they're not, not just that, they're not very nice when we're like, well, can you do something about this? Or what do we, they're like, go away, kid, you're bothering me kind of thing, right?
The accountability is not there, and that's what's disturbing.
What are the qualifications for the county judges?
They have to be a member of the bar,
Okay,
they have to be a US citizen, and they have to live in the county.
nothing else.
No.
Are there any training requirements?
They do have kind of new judge training, but I think Judge Dean did that eons ago, and
Is there any like
There is.
kind of stuff?
and I would say there are two type of judges in Eastern Washington, the ones that are Eastern Washington born and bred, and the ones that are a little more open to alternative to just law and justice, if that makes any sense at all.
Question.
Okay,
It's in constellation. I think it's the same qualifications for federal judges and Supreme Court judges too. US citizen bar.
you know, one of the things that we could decide to do is law enforcement doesn't charge anyone with crimes or only charges certain crimes, and those come to us. And we get to engage that person, that suspect, before any crimes charged. I mean, it's a plethora of things we can do. Yeah,
You know, we have to keep growing our police department because we keep having to address these repeat offenders along with the new ones that are coming into the community to do crime. Okay, Councilmember Espinosa.
Yeah, I think it's pretty concerning, for our citizens and for our residents in terms of businesses as they look at these statistics. I just would like to learn if it's systemic or if it's isolated, just a few cases here and there. Maybe we can talk later, Ria, so you can give me give us, more of a background into other cases where we can see, hey, it's happened a lot. So some red flags that we really have to pay attention to.
I enjoy that conversation with you, definitely.
Councilmember Peterson.
Yeah, so I guess I've been on the council and I've lived through the transition from what we had to what we have to where we're headed. I think what's interesting is the remodel of the chambers over there right now fits in with this. One of the complaints before is that the court was these tables being set up, which gave it an aura of maybe not the professionalism that we would have hoped for. And so the fact that may look more like, it could be modified to look more like a court is a real positive, going forward. And the time, I think the issue at the time was the time spent, setting that up and monitoring that and all the rest of it. You don't have to answer the next question if you don't want to. Do you have the feeling that the College Place cases are handled differently or at a reduced level of severity because they're from the city of College Place and not from Walla Walla or the county?
It's interesting you asked that because I just got a revenue report from the court. And so this is monies due that's been ordered by the court for defendants to pay and due. And the rate of collection is almost 3 times for Walla Walla County than it is the city of Walla Walla. And it's about 2 times the rate of us. And I'm gonna ask Tim Donaldson, city attorney, about that. I don't understand why that is the case. And that's the handling of probation violations, not paying your fine. It seems to me they should all be the same.
So the county's getting more revenue from their.
Yeah, and I don't know,
We
but
are
this is a
fine.
3-year period, so it was over enough period of time. I would say yes, just because we have a different judge. College Place has always had a different judge. And he just doesn't impose any ramifications for a probation violation. It's so rare.
Mm.
Yeah.
So it's more the judge, not necessarily the location of the offenders.
I think so.
Yeah,
I
anyway,
think so.
that kind of goes, what you just touched on kind of goes to my next question. So we're looking basically at what the fee we're paying versus what a judge would cost. And some other things, but that's kind of the hardcore.
That's
comparison.
that's gonna be the hardcore finance and that's gonna be about the hardcore finance
So-
and of it. Now, what I will say is, and this is just based off of my experience in Colfax, because they had their and then timesing it by difference in population. If I were to ballpark it, I would think per year with an escalator, it would probably be about a difference of another 45,000 and then increase it per year. However, the thing that does offset that some is that because the county does it right now, most of the fines they keep. And then when you do it yourself, you get to do the fee schedule and set proportions and so forth. So I would say the gap is less. I will say the headache is more, which is why we're gonna try to right this ship, but just with some of the emails and communications I've been included on, I'm concerned enough where I need to at least let you know. So if you hear like, hey, they're looking at separating, it's not because I want to, it's having to do with the out of the justice issue.
I've asked,
So to go back, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I've asked Mike or made comments numerous times of, why don't we just increase a fine, like for violators of the noise ordinance, you know, those old cars that have no mufflers. You know, and it's like, we can't, that's up to the county to decide what the fees are. We can't arbitrate, you know, we can't decide to up our ticket fees, our citation fees, anything like that.
So that funding gap, which we're gonna
Yeah.
experience, we don't know what the dollar amount is.
Yeah.
Goes back, Rita, to your comment about, I guess, collections and not, well, collections. Inflow of revenue or whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it. And you're saying, Mike, you know, the difference there on what's happening with, you know, College Place versus not versus who's keeping what and whatever. So it'll be interesting to see. We wouldn't know until it all got settled, but I know in the past, we've had conversations even with the city of College Place levying, and I'm not sure we've had good follow through on that. But even with our police officers, when a DUI or an accident and there are certain fees that we can collect. And I'm not sure if we're doing that, when we talk.
We do order restitution for the emergency response
Okay.
in every DUI case.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, I apologize for that. Okay.
No. that's a good
And so
question.
those are things that, you know, it's gonna cost us, but we probably could minimize that gap.
For sure.
With what's going on. here.
For sure.
Yeah, okay.
And honestly, I think if the judge just, this is what I've asked for and been denied in court is, okay, this gentleman, Billy Joe Cook, he gets a ride from Spokane here by a arrest warrant, and then he hangs out here and his case in Spokane issues a warrant to show court, and gets transferred back. So he just has this kind of little fun travel thing, and it's restitution he owes, and he hasn't paid anything in years. And I've tried, okay, Billy, if you pay $5 in the next 30 days, you won't have to serve 3 days in jail. Purge conditions, it works. And he says, okay, I'm gonna wrangle up $5 and pay, so I am not in jail. And the judge refuses to do that. And so nothing happens. So it's frustrating. Because I don't want to put people in jail, that's the last thing I want to do. Yeah.
I had a question. This might be my ignorance or too many John Grisham books, but, or both, or both, probably both. But in terms of jurisdiction, I don't know how the jurisdiction works. So in terms of, we got an interim here of 2, 3, 4 years, if that's a path if we take it, so on and so forth. Right, you have these significant cases, you need restitution for community reputation, so on and so forth. It's not a scenario where it's like, hey, we see something, this case, this whatever needs to go to this separate judge, this separate jurisdiction or something, that as to essentially avoid the judge here, that it's not, I know it's cheeky, but like, if there's legitimate reason to say, I don't believe this is the right place for this particular case, it needs to be seen in another judge, another jurisdiction.
Yeah, so we are responsible for everything that occurs in the city. That's not a felony. And that's the judge we have in district courts. So it doesn't go anywhere else.
What's the petty theft limit?
$750. Yeah, it's not very much, but yeah, anything, that is used to.
That's actually, it's a good
But
jump.
I prosecute a lot of cases that are over that. Yeah, you know, sometimes when we have spray paint, if the damages are higher, but I keep that because the county's not gonna do anything. I can affidavit a judge for no reason, meaning for no reason, I don't want you on my case.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe that's a tactic because I could blanket affidavit my judge.
Well,
But
yeah, I don't need
then
to.
we bring another judge in, and there's cost to the county, and that's just kind of
Okay, all right.
yeah.
I was thinking about the egregious stuff, and then of course, you get this 3, 4 year
Yeah.
I'm just curious to how it works.
I guess, let me, our conversation right now is bringing awareness to our concerns.
Yeah.
And it's a public
Yeah.
awareness
Yeah.
right now, because
Yep.
we're being recorded and all that.
Yeah.
And so will that change behavior? We don't know. It may.
I would.
But if it doesn't, then, there's a clear message of where we're headed.
Well, yeah, that's that's the other reason I want to get out there too, because when we were doing some initial analysis of the idea, I'll just say there was some interesting emails back from certain folks that won't be named, that were alleging, oh, well, you're doing this because maybe it's a cost consideration or stuff like that. It's not. It's because it's getting to a point where initially there was disrespect and random emails from court, in my opinion, and so on and so forth. But then I'm hearing the same thing from the police department, where Troy and his officers are about ready to pull their hair out with what's going on. And then there's a bit of trend, which in my opinion is disturbing. So the only way to fix that trend, because we've handled it via private channels, hasn't worked. So it's either this public channel, hopefully mentioned this way, is gonna pop a little light bulb being like, oh, I should think critically. Or if it doesn't, then I'm just putting out there, this isn't a cost consideration, it's a justice, community livability.
Yeah.
And if it gets to that point, I want you to have an awareness of it where it isn't like, oh, it's a cost thing. No, it would cost way more to do our own court. But at a certain point, when you weigh justice and livability against costs, one has to go over the other, so.
And I wear my heart on my sleeve. There's people in this room that can attest to that. And it breaks my heart.
Yeah.
It really breaks my heart having this situation.
We'll fix it.
Yep.
Yeah, not giving up.
Nope.
Councilmember Sherman?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So if we hire a judge, I know that this is like 4 years down the road, like you're saying, and because we're sharing currently, does this become a full-time role, or is that even a consideration when you're hiring a judge? Is it a contractor position? Is it employee?
Contractor.
Yes, and I think Tim Donaldson, the city attorney for Walla Walla, might have presided over some of College Place cases back in the day, so.
Yeah. Okay. And then my other question is, I understand what you're saying, and I know we wouldn't, I think I know the answer to this question, but I still want to ask it. Are the things that are happening now specific like to the judge and not to current legislation or like the rules in the state of Washington, that they're saying like, oh, I'm just gonna like lean on this BS thing and say that I'm gonna, rule in this way, but it really is a lack of that, I guess. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, which is, yes, it's, I would say our criminal justice system in Washington State is one that if I were charged with a crime, I would want to be in Washington State. I mean,
Seriously.
we are very, very careful in meting out our punishment, and our whole goal is rehabilitation. But I think right now what's happening is we are defeating ourselves. And the only thing I've seen change in the years I've been here is criminal fines are pretty much non-existent. Just because, it disproportionately punishes the poor, which I agree with. That's an agreement, but restitution or mandatory fines, DUI cost recoupment, a lot of DUI fines, there's a mandatory victim compensation fine for domestic violence cases, things like that, that we do need to impose that are imposed. We're just not getting the money because nothing is happening. So, and I'm like, you can afford $5, right? Every now and then, it's almost the principle of it more than the money.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I appreciate you bringing this. I know that this has been something that you've mentioned over the years, maybe obviously not with this sense of urgency or the real need for, but it's definitely not news. And I appreciate you sharing this. I would be interested to hear how your conversation with Tim goes about this revenue report. If you can follow up with us.
I will. I sent it to Tim and said, what do you make of this? So yeah, I think I'll have conversations with him over the next years to figure this out. Yeah.
Awesome.
So obviously our end goal is to have this situation be resolved in our current contract situation so that we can continue sharing with our neighbors. That's our preferred. That really is like far enough above our preferred. So, but this is just on the back burner if nothing changes.
Contingency plan.
Yeah,
Out of
exactly.
curiosity, if we did break the contract, would we pretty much just be required to pay for the years that we weren't getting down there anyway, or what's the?
That's a good question, but my guess would be that they would sue us to require us to actually comply with the contract versus a payout money.
Seriously?
Yeah. Just because the upset, the apple cart, they would lose employees, they would, lose court funding, they would lose a lot if we were just to walk away. I mean, we could settle with them. We might be able to go and say, we'll pay you this if you let us out. But I think if we just walked away, they would sue us and require us to continue with that.
Yeah, our fees or our contribution pays for, I don't know, half a judge and number of employees.
It pays for the part-time.
So it pays, we pay for the full part-time judge and then like 6 employees or something. I can't remember what it was.
And I'll say the court services from the employees there are outstanding. I mean, one of the best courts I've worked with. If I need something, I'll take care of it. They're just great person.
So we hate for them to have to endure the fallout.
Is there room for a Hall of Justice in the Kieran Christensen party? I mean, at least, give us that option. It's like a viable one.
Right.
Police station / Hall of Justice.
Oh, yeah,
School, high school.
yeah, there. All right, so let's move on then. Legislative session, so 2023, Mike.
Yeah, so again, I'll just provide a summary here because it's getting late. So you can.
Are you tired?
I'm just kidding, huh?
Well, then there's a lot of bills that compare the past sessions. I mean, typically with COVID and stuff, I mean, you'd be lucky if you had like 100 and right now there's over like 750 of them moving around at the moment. So the big ones is there's basically a bill in the House to reinstate some of the pursuit language. So we're following that one carefully because they need to peel some of that back because to put it in perspective, prior to their solution on that, we'd be lucky if we had, I would say, a pursuit a year. And last year we closed with over 20 of them. And keep in mind that that law only engaged like in June. So that is like half a year's worth. And if you go on the wall like scan or Facebook page, you'll see that being simulcast quite a bit on there. So that's an issue. Also, there's one with urban growth areas we're following, which is actually interesting because it gets to the heart of our issue without having to change the countywide planning policy. House Bill 1402 basically says that if a land is in the city or urban growth area and has sat undeveloped for 20 years, that it doesn't count against your allocation. So if that passes, in essence, we would actually be able to get additional urban, it's like a circuit breaker to our current issue. So Representative Clicker wrote that bill, so let's hope it passes. Missing middle housing bills, yeah.
Can you explain that again real quickly?
Yeah, so right now, when you do the urban growth areas, they give like a 20% discount rate to people in that like want to develop their lands,
Oh.
but it's still like, there still is the 80% that counts against us, which is why we have such a tight urban growth area.
Got it.
If this bill were instituted, that limitation, would essentially evaporate and we would be able to do what we need to do. So that's a big one. Missing middle housing bill. That one is well intentioned, but we're gonna lobby to put in some critical thought language into it, I would say. They're trying to take a one size fits all approach and put it on- Yeah. So in the missing middle housing bill, they basically want to make single family residential zoning illegal. So it would upzone everything to multifamily. At a state level, so statewide and urbanized areas, no matter your population. The other disturbing thing as part of this bill is that for every tax lot, no matter the size of it, so it doesn't take into account size of the tax lot, they're saying that you could put up to 6 accessory dwelling units on every tax lot. And we have really weird shaped tax lots in the old part of town, so I would, like where I used to live, I would love to see how you would fit that in, but we would have nothing to say about it.
So you can I put an apartment in my front yard.
Essentially, yeah, yes. And then the other issue with this bill too is it also makes parking requirements in all areas illegal. So, yeah. So there's quite a push from I-5 corridor naturally, including some cities over there, because they're alleging some of the outlying suburbs aren't doing their part. But instead of looking at it from a critical perspective, they're just taking a one size fits all and trying to spread it across everywhere. So I think the stance that we need to take is either you have population thresholds it applies to, or you need to essentially have it tied to the size of the tax lot and the built condition of the environment. So that's a big deal. Appropriations wise, we're gonna be working to try to get more Majania Road money and wastewater treatment plant money. The big heavy lift we have right now, which is bad news, I was a bit shocked when I went to this meeting, is Highway 12 Phase 8. So Phase 7 is gonna wrap up this spring. And in the Connecting Washington bill from 15, there was money in there to go for engineering and right of way. And the idea from the regional level was that, since the state was paying for the right of way and the engineering, that could count as a local match, and you could go to the feds and be like, hey, now it's your turn, go pay for Phase 8. And there's a lot of money coming from DC for that. Well, we have a meeting as a coalition with Todd Trepanier from the State Department of Transportation. And what they basically said is, oh, well, the state issued the other transportation bill that has to do with transportation alternatives that occurred basically last year, but there's no projects associated with it on this side of the mountains. And they're alleging, well, now there's too much work between the two bills, so we need to go root out projects that basically we feel aren't ready. So even though it's in that package that was adopted in 15, that engineering and right of way was supposed to start this year. And as it currently stands and is in the governor's budget, they actually want to punt out engineering and right of way 8 to 10 years. Which is not what Connecting Washington said, and they're trying to do it to us. And if you look, there's a correlation of doing it with a lot of east side projects. So the north-south freeway in Spokane's another one. In Connecting Washington, they had money to finally get it done. And I mean, that was talked about for the last 60 years, and they want to kick that out 10 years too. So Spokane's making a lot of noise because they have someone that's in the Democrat delegation to push it. But what I'm urging, and I've told the board this, is we have to be a super loud squeaky wheel to keep that up on the priorities, because with the money coming out federally, if that gets kicked out 10 years, the pessimist in me says that good luck ever seeing it happen, because there's a lot of transportation money out right now. And that money that's in Connect in Washington, that could count as a local match of federal money. So if they allocate that out 10 years, we have no local match, and that's not, the federal government's not gonna bite. So contact everyone that needs to be brought back where it was. Cause that was in the package for now.
I have a theory that we're being politically punished. The east side of Washington, because it was in the package and we're ready to go. As opposed to other projects on the west side that aren't ready to go, that are saying, well, they're gonna be able to have the money when they're ready.
Well, and if you look at the time, there is something to that, because if you look at how the votes were done legislatively, like back in the Connecting Washington package, I'll just say, look at the districts and the representation voted for it versus no, and the projects funded versus those who voted for and against on the other one, and there is a correlation. So I'll couch it that way, but that's a big one.
Mike, what was clickers?
Bill?
Bill?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that one. That I believe is the 1402 one, and that's having to do with urban growth areas. That's a big deal, that one.
I just want to make sure I have the number right.
Yeah.
So I can. send on to-
That's a really interesting article. I think it's the New York Times. You guys can look out there on, cities.
Yeah.
That have grandmother houses, and the article is interesting in that. From one city to the other, even in close proximity, how some are violently opposed to it. And others embrace it.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about a 200 square foot house behind,
Mhm.
and how, and then the parking issues that come with it and everything like that. But it was, communities that look similar and how different they view those multiple, units.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Right, because there are some that are used to the density and some that
right,
like the
yeah,
open space.
So I was briefing y'all on that because next week I go over there to talk with the state agencies and DOT about phase 8, so that'll be enlightening. And then also with the legislative delegation, the chairs of various committees. So I just want to keep you updated before I depart.
never seen you again.
Mike,
Yeah.
on our representatives or our elected officials.
Yeah.
Do our elected officials have any? No, I don't want to use the word muscle, but ability to influence any of this, or is it like? They're like, we're just so far below.
I mean, right now, the ours are like in the minority,
So,
so it isn't close like it was like a couple of years ago when Connecting Washington passed, so. There isn't like that threat of, oh, you need the votes for the super major, I mean, they have it. I do think Senator Dozier is in some leadership positions, for the minority, it could be helpful there. So.
I'm just wondering that as a constituents, who we should send our voices to. But, you
Yeah.
know, if our representatives want to do something about it, but they have absolute zero power and ability to do it or voice.
I think,
I was gonna say, I found when I've emailed our representatives, it's usually an assistant, and every response I've gotten back is, if this makes it out of rules, I will pass on this information, or so I kind of do blanket, and they tell me whether I'm telling the right person or not.
Okay,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my experience.
yeah,
okay.
Well, we had a speaker of the house who voted out of office a few years ago, so might have helped us. Eastern Washington's known for its
yeah.
smart move.
All right. On how smart we can be.
Yep.
Let's move on to the Pocket iNet franchise.
This is just another FYI, so, the franchise for Pocket iNet, we received notification that they want to transfer it. So it's going through FCC right now, but there's a company called Lightspeed Internet Networks out of Portland, Oregon. And essentially they're acquiring Pocket INET, and Pocket INET is going to be a subsidiary of it. So, but they'll still be the local representation, and Mr. Brandenburg will still be the president of Pocket INET, but it's like a subsidiary of Lightspeed Networks. I will say the benefit to us though is Lightspeed Networks is gonna end up doing a substantial investment in extending out broadband infrastructure into those donut holes that I've been talking about the last couple of years. So it's good because that means additional options across College Place for public works staff. That's gonna be like pulling the hair out, because likely I think they're gonna be going to town and putting in their infrastructure the same time Zipley is. So that's not the greatest thing, but at the end of it, they'll be faster and other options. So that we are under a shot clock on, so that will be on the next meeting as well to approve.
Great. Well, you actually did, that one actually was quick.
Yeah.
I'm excited about this, Mike. I really am. I think, instead of a $350 a month charter bill,
I know.
Yeah.
I said that out loud, but I'm just gonna say, options are nice.
And available to people who it's not available to
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because it was expensive.
Yeah.
Well, you hear people,
Prohibitive to many.
parking in front of McDonald's to get Wi-Fi connection so they do schoolwork and all kinds of cool.
Well, quite a few people have been using our Wi-Fi
Yeah.
locations at the parks because we partnered with Pocket INET because they have
Yeah.
really fast internet. They have over the 300. So people have been using it because like my old neighborhood, I mean, all the council meetings I was attending during COVID, that's why you never saw me at home and I was in the office because the times I tried the remote, then it kicked me out. Thank you, Lumen.
We saw you, you were just frozen.
Yeah.
All right, any questions for Mike, Councilmember Sherman and Ms. Espinosa, any questions on this topic? No, okay, then we are down to closing items. Is there any other business for good of the order? All right, hearing none. I'll now conclude the workshop at 7 p.m. Thank you all very much.
When I spoke with Tim, said that Tim Donaldson.
Are we on?
Oh, yeah, this is a good story, so it could be on the.
Okay.